Welcome to the Far-Flung Tin Can podcast. This is episode 4. We've got Jonathan Warbe, Gary Keelan, myself, Kyle Philippi, and we're here. We just got back from Peru 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks, yep.
And so we're recapping everything Peru, everything crazy, everything spiritual that happens on a trip like Peru.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, like, we went to Peru 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
First time.
That's the last time we were there.
Yep. And a lot has happened since then. Like, I mean, we got there and, I mean, there's a church, there's missionaries, and there's a lot, right? And we're like, wow, like this thing has been growing. But there's like a lot also that happened before that. And so, you know, I know Gary, you were on the first trip. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of got to see the evolution of what's been going on in Peru, you know. We went on that first scouting trip, which was...
They just stared at us.
Yeah,
you know,
really.
They were told they're pagan and don't get a lot of outside visitors. They want to one day do tourism, and we show up, and it was like we were like the trial run on their tourism, and they're doing demonstrations for us. And Gary preached a small message, but it was very somber, stoic.
Yeah. You know, one of the stories, Kyle, I would like for you to tell is, you know, we had no contacts there in Peru. There's no churches that we were connected up with per se. And you found somebody online. You found, Francisco online? Is that the way you found him?
I found him through a friend of a friend of a friend.
And the way we first met him face to face was hilarious. Remember, we got off the train, and it was the middle of the night, and it was raining.
It was a driving rainstorm.
It was a driving rainstorm, as usual.
It really was.
So it looked like something in a movie. We're getting off and with dim lighting, you know, inside of a train station.
Nobody's in it.
Nobody's in it. We don't know nobody. We've never been there before. And it's kind of empty, and we're like, what in the world? And we peep around the corner, and here comes Francisco. So
in his trench coat.
I was going to say, in his trench coat.
Yeah, that made it all the more.
Dick Tracy showed up to pick us up.
Exactly. And I'm like, who is this cat that Kyle has basically recruited from who knows where?
His first decision was a poor one, too. Remember, we debated, do we need 2 taxis or 1?
Yeah.
And we decided on 1. And it was further away than we thought. And we were piled, sitting on each other's laps and on luggage.
He's like, it's an hour drive. We'll be there in no time.
Speed bumps every 30 seconds.
2 hours later.
And Kyle's stuck in the back. Remember that? He's in the back. And that's when you had that, I guess...
Come to Jesus, his dark night of the soul, or this, soul-searching thing. Are we really doing this? And what are we doing? I don't know what y'all were doing up there in the front, but I was preparing for the end in the back.
Yeah. Kyle's walking in the spirit, and I was walking in the flesh because I was getting sleepy and dozing off. And every time, about the time I'd start get the REM sleep going, you know, rapid eye movement, here we'd go across the speed bump because they don't use... In order to control the speed in Peru, there are absolutely no speed limit signs. So the way they control your speed is speed bumps because you'll knock the bottom of your car out. So here we're going over these, and I doze off and then hit another one. So I was up there just like, Lord, help me maintain my sanctification. So Kyle's in the back, you know, having that dark night of the soul. So everybody was at a different point, I think.
At one point, Gary looks back and was like, if I fall asleep one more time and there's another speed bump, I might just lose it.
Yeah. By the time we got back on the second time, you know, the second time we visited, which was 2.5 years ago, we brought a larger group.
Yeah.
And we went island hopping. You know, we went from island to island. And I felt like we made headway on that trip, you know. Seeing them react,
right?
And it seemed like maybe our faith boost went up every island.
Yep.
First one, we're kind of okay. All right, well, here we go. And they still somehow responded. And then we go to the next island, and we're like, well, they responded to that, okay. We put a little more confidence in it. then they really responded.
Right.
They're like, this is happening.
Yeah.
But I didn't think, I don't know, I don't know where your faith level is. I didn't expect for things to be where they were on this trip.
Oh, yeah, not at all. Well, I mean, like, you think these people have been living on these islands, right, for hundreds of years, right? Thousands. Yeah. And so, like, in my mind, things just move at a different pace, right? The first time we're there, they were, like you said, they were stoic. They weren't super flexible, open. They were just kind of looking at us like, who are these guys? Where did they come from? What are they doing?
Yeah.
And so definitely, yeah, it's definitely like impressive and surprising to see where they're at today. And we arrived this time and they welcome us. The chief is welcoming us, which we prayed for that chief. I don't know if you remember the last time we were there. Mm-hmm. And he had shared with us, please pray for me because I don't know how to lead my islands.
Right.
I don't know how to be a chief. I don't know how to lead.
Almost as if it was a mistake that they elected him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he had a lot of fear with that. He was kind of insecure. But then to see what happened this time, I mean, I know you came the next day, but when we first got there, Gary, it was crazy because, and that's a funny story in itself, but.
What did happen? Why did you show up the next day?
Oh, my goodness. I took this COVID test, and you got to take the test within 72 hours of your flight, and they promised me it'll be back within 72 hours. So I'm in the Houston airport looking at my phone, checking my email, clicking on the link, looking to see if the results were going to come back, and sure enough, they did not come back. So I had to rebook my flight, and then the lady working the desk there where I rebooked, she gave me 2 places that I could call, and for $200 you could get a COVID test and get the results back in an hour. For $100 you could get your COVID test back in 5 hours, and if you wanted to pay $50, you get your COVID test back in 10 hours. And I asked her, I said, well, is this guaranteed? She said, yes. So I actually had to rebook, go to a hotel, go take another COVID test. That night in the hotel, my results finally did come back from the first test. But the problem is it's after 72 hours, so it wouldn't have qualified anyway. So the next morning, of course, I went and took the test. Next morning, I come back and got the results. And, of course, they were negative. But what I didn't know is Kyle had given me a bag. He said, this is the bag you're to carry, 2 bags. I didn't even look in it. And I was supposed to get a lock. And I went to 2 different places to get a lock, but they didn't have the type of lock, the TSA locks. So I gave up on that. Maybe I shouldn't have. And I fixed a lock, my style, with some tape.
As soon as I saw it, I was like curious. I was like, I don't know if he actually bought a lock or not. And I go and look, and this thing he's made like a duct tape zipper. He's somehow fashioned a zipper out of duct tape.
Probably wouldn't keep anybody out.
I will say Gary's the master of duct tape.
He is like a MacGyver. Yeah. Well, we sleep in tents. Yeah. It gets down to 30 degrees. And I knew we had all of the tents in the bags. And I put two tents in 2 bags, 2 tents in another bag. But what I didn't realize was that I put 4 poles all in Gary's bag. So we get there, all we have is mesh.
Tarps.
Yeah.
And mesh.
Yeah, and stakes.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
if we want to suffocate, we can. So luckily, and this is not free branding for Kamek, but the brand Kamek gave us some gear, and they gave us a hammock stand, a hammock tent, an underbelly insulator.
And a fly tarp.
Right, and a fly tarp. So the chief allowed 3 of us to sleep in his house. I don't know where he went. And then Carla, who was the only female, slept in the hammock tent. And it got down to like 28 with on the lake. And she was warmer there than anywhere else the rest of the week.
Which we were worried about that she was going to be freezing. But she's like, no, this is the warmest I've slept.
We got in the tents the next night, and she was like, can I go back to my hammock?
Yep.
Yeah, it was really cold. I remember getting some water in a cup, setting it over in the corner of the tent, thinking, I'll get thirsty in the middle of the night, and I won't want to leave this tent, once I get in there and kind of get in my sleeping bag. At 3 a.m., I reached over to get my, quote, glass of water, but it had turned into solid ice. So I'm over there, and I've turned the cup up, and no water's coming out, and I'm looking, it's frozen solid. So that one night, it was really cold.
It's crazy. People are like, during the pandemic, we fed all these families, like 70 families. Yeah. And, people are like, why don't they just fish? And they do, but they've got, what are they called? Kingfish? What are they called?
Yeah, kingfish.
They've got these kingfish, like the size of your finger.
Yeah.
And that's what they survived on for thousands of years.
Right.
And then in the 1920s, they decided, you know what, we need to stock this lake with some big fish. So they went to Michigan and stocked it with trout.
Yep.
And the trout ate up everything else. And now there's like no fish.
Yeah. And
then commercial fishing also took out most of the trout.
Right.
And the trout ate the kingfish. So there's very little fish. And the other thing that they can do is hunt duck. Yeah. And we've seen them do that. I mean, I don't know guns very well, but I'll let one of you describe the best you can these handmade guns.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, basically, it's like melted steel. They make their guns, and it looks like a regular gun, right? But it looks like they got a 2x4, and they carved it out on one end, right, which is the buttstock. And then they put a piece of steel, right, which is the barrel that's hollowed out on the other side. And then they have this little, steel trigger. And then they, it's the old style. I mean, this is like black powder, bird shot, and they're stuffing this thing down in there with notebook paper, as the wadding. And so we actually had a guy on the trip, Joel, that was given the opportunity to shoot.
This thing looks like, you remember those probably from the 50s, those old guns that had the cork on the end with the string, and when you shoot it pop, and it pops off, and that's what it looked like.
Oh my goodness!
But Joel was the designated. He duck hunts.
Yeah.
So he was like, I would love to do this, but it took. I think I timed it one of the times. It took like 3 minutes to
reload.
Yep. And so you finally get up to a duck. You're sneaking up on these things. Of course, they have their own. They're like signaling the ducks. They don't have duck calls, but they use their hat right above the reed.
Oh yeah, it's like
show for those watching the video.
They fold it up and they're like,
and
I guess that looks like a duck.
Yeah, I guess that looks like wing.
The wing flapping.
If you have nothing else, you're just like, I guess that looks like a duck. And then he takes the pole and he's like swishing around in the mud and the reed, like, and he's going, and he's calling.
What did he do?
He's and then he's shaking the hat, and so you're doing all this work to finally get a duck within range, and the gun's not very accurate, and so Joel took 3 shots. All of them were too low, and there's a delay. We have a video of him trying to shoot this duck, and it's like splash.
Yep.
I don't know how that works.
Oh my God.
So he goes, "Oh, I got it." And then he was like, because the duck heard the gunshot and then it dove under the water.
Yep. They got away every time.
So the guy's like, "Hey, if you really want to experience this, if you want to duck hunt, you need to go at 1 a.m. We're like, all right. So Gary had just gotten in. He's like, I don't think so. Warbe was like, nah. Like everybody was just like, no. So I'll go. I'll document.
Yeah.
Again, it's like 28 degrees out. I get up at 1, and I'm like ready at 1, and we're walking around the island. Eduardo is his name. He's not up. And so we're starting to think we're being hazed because it's been 20 minutes, and he's not coming out. So I'm going up to all the huts and knocking on their reed huts, going, Eduardo. Eventually, he comes out. 1:30, we leave. We hit open water for like 30 minutes. Just open water.
Oh, my goodness.
And then we start getting close to the reed. Like, all right, here we go. We're already cold. And then, we park, and he, and we have no translator because Jonathan's asleep. So I'm having to
oh my goodness,
base it off of
that.
what I can understand. And he is telling me of the words that I understood. He's saying, Luna después debajo. And I was like, okay. And Joel's looking at me. I'm a translator now. And I'm like, okay, we have to wait for the sun to go down. And the sun's like up in the sky. So I was like, ¿Cuándo?
The moon.
The moon. Sorry, the moon. Yes. And I was like, when? And he's like, probably 3. And it's 2. It's 2:10.
Oh my goodness.
And
That's crazy.
I asked him later on when I had a proper translator. I was like, did you just move here? Like, you don't know when the moon goes down? He's like, I forgot.
Oh my goodness.
So we sat in a cold boat at 28 degrees, not properly clothed, you know. We were clothed for 28 degrees.
Right.
For an hour. And we were already cold, and we're just trying to get our feet warm. We're just, waiting. Finally, he's like, okay, it's time. And so we go out there and hunt duck, and we got 4 of them. And
there was a long-legged species.
There was a moment. I need to be careful because we found out later on that the law was broken. We were instructed to kill a certain bird. And we were like, no. And he's like, yes, we need it to eat. So we'll just say that much. We were scarred.
Yeah,
we were scarred from a bird that died. But yeah, so that's how they survive.
Yeah.
Very small fish and duck.
And they set out nets. Like they set out nets pretty much every day. And they wake up early morning and like before the sun comes up to start going to check those nets.
They let us try duck and potatoes, and Warbe tells us, he said, yeah, they cook these in ice. And I went,
oh my goodness.
Listen. I was like, hold on.
No.
What? He goes, yeah, this is cooked in ice. I said, I heard you.
Listen, no, but this is what they told me. Okay, so they said, now maybe I just got lost in translation, right, in my mind, but this guy said, and he said specifically in Spanish, he's like, these are cooked in ice.
Right, and so I asked you 4 times to explain yourself, and he continued to say, they're cooked in ice. And I was like, that,
I understand
you're
what you're
telling
saying,
me they are prepared with heat is what cooking is in ice. And so eventually, if anybody's wondering, which since then I've seen like 3 different places on like YouTube, or like I've heard people talk about this method and I've never heard of it before, but apparently you can soak in cold water something like potatoes,
which we saw, I think, the next day or 2.
Yeah, they just soaked it.
Yep.
Which kind of makes me nauseous thinking about it, but they just soaked the potatoes until they were soggy.
Pretty much, yeah. But they
were warm when we ate them, so I think they like they soaked them and then they were able to just get them to a warm temperature just so
boil them or
appeasing to your mouth.
Yeah. Which is like, I think he said that they like set it to where the ice can set on it in the morning. So I don't know if that's a process, but yeah.
Going to that one floating island, that bog.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
At sunset, they said they want to go to a family that even like the locals never really go to this this island. I only saw one hut. Was there others?
There was 2 huts, but I think one was like the kitchen.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was so shallow, we couldn't even get in. We're like trying to like push our way through the water, and it was stagnant water.
Smelled awful.
Smelled just yeah. And we're like, Eduardo's yelling from the boat, like, brother, can I come?
Hermano.
Hermano. Yeah. So we like get off the boat, walk in.
Which we didn't know what to expect at first, because every other island we've seen, or any other hut we've seen on anything that's solid ground, was on a decent island, right? Mm-hmm. Like most of the islands, I think all of the islands we had visited up to that point, were, fairly clean, new layers of reed. And so in my mind, that's what I expected to see when they said, hey, we're going to another island. Because even on the way to the island where we stay, we pass a few islands, and they're all pretty much similar in the way they build them. But I didn't expect that.
Oh, and that whole family seemed like they had a little bit of a sickness. I don't know if overall sick or if they just all had a bug, but health didn't seem great. Obviously, no money. What do you think, Gary? I mean, just going in there doing that.
Yeah, that was probably one of the more impactful, things we did for me on the floating islands. First of all, their hut was very small, and we're trying to cram in there along with them. And it was all the building could do to, if you want to call it a building, to, get all of us in there. And, they're a different culture, and you're sitting there thinking, well, how we're going to minister to them. And, of course, Jonathan did an awesome job, translating. And of course, we had Leo and Francisco. Of course, Francisco doesn't speak any English, but Leo speaks sufficiently enough. But, presenting the gospel. Once we started into that, then there was a comfort that I felt there. But I lost it there emotionally. It's like one of those things when tears start flowing, you can't hardly control it. Probably don't need to, truth be known. But, it just is one of those things where my heart was really going out to them as far as empathy and compassion. And, of course, it's exciting in one sense because they were just so open to hear, open to receive. And we had the food. What did we have? We had rice,
sugar,
oil, and sugar, in these bags right in front of them. And you could tell that made a huge difference.
Yeah,
as far as their diet and what they're able to, put together for meals for the families. A mom and a dad. What was it? 4? I think it was 4 kids.
Four kids. Yeah.
4 kids, and kind of stair-stepped. But they listened. And
what's your strategy in that type of scenario? You're going in there, don't know if they have really any. They may have some background. They may have none.
Yeah, if anything, the gospel is cross-cultural in nature. So if you can communicate it to them, the Bible promises His word, will not return void. So the content is going to be the same. It's who Christ is and what He did. You're presenting them that, and then giving them opportunity to become followers like we are, disciples of Christ. But on this occasion, I just felt like, again, visuals. As much visuals as I can use, I think helps break down the communication barrier. Even though Jonathan does a good job, I think the visual helps and aids. So I use Evangelism Cube, as you all know, and just went through that with them with the pictures. That helped. And the kids seemed to pay attention more even with that, with that cube, like a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Did you or Francisco or Leo instruct them to lift their hands?
No.
Wow.
That's
huge.
Yeah. There was a really special moment.
That always throws me off.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way. It's just it's so weird if you don't have any type of church background.
Right.
We kind of do it as second nature. We just
right.
know, and when you see it visually, you're like, it's on film. When you see it, you're just like, oh yeah, they're receiving. But if you stop, you're like, hold on a second.
Does somebody prompt them or tell them?
How
lift your
is
hands?
this even? Why is that their response?
Right. Which this, there was a really special moment. I think that when you were speaking, we prayed. I know Kyle, you spoke, said a few things, and there was just some really, really special moments that happened. One of the things that I was really. I just knew that the Lord was working in that moment. It's because there was this level of willingness, right? We've noticed hesitation in the past, right? From them, right? From a lot of people that live on the islands. And I remember Pastor Francisco saying, you know, this is your choice, right? Like, you don't feel like you have to do this. We're just we're just telling you about Jesus. And like, even explaining that, there was still such a like eagerness, right? Mm-hmm. And a willingness in their hearts. And then when you gave them the Bibles, which I feel like that's my favorite part. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we've given a Bible to someone and they've just very carelessly taken it.
Right.
Every time we've given someone a Bible, when we go to the islands, even in La Rinconada, it's like we're giving them a bar of gold. Mm-hmm. Which, it's crazy because, like, how many Bibles do we have sitting at home, right? Mm-hmm. Just on our nightstand, on a bookshelf. And we give them a New Testament Bible, fine print, and they think we've given them like $1 million. Mm. And so, like, just that whole moment in this house. And, you know, another thing that I noticed too, that they were alone. Like, you slightly mentioned that a second ago, Kyle. Like, they were alone, isolated.
That's right.
You know, because I think most everyone else lives in community.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was such a, in that culture, apparently in the religious side of that culture, I'll say that, apparently they're used to paying for anything that is supposed to be good, that's really supposed to be given to them freely. I've noticed they're used to, paying for it. So when you hand them the Bible, the look they always have, it looks as if they're like, all right, well, how much I got to pay for this,
Right.
We're taught that on Christian TV anyways.
Oh, my goodness.
That's not just
you get me on this.
To them.
You're pretty mean, Get me on that
we'll
topic.
Send you.
Yeah, we'll send you. And when we tell them it's free, their faces just start lighting up, and then they want it. They're hungry for it. And same thing with prayer.
Yeah.
They walked up, as you remember, on the first trip, and some of them had money trying to pay us to pray for them. We said, put the money up. It's free. I like to use this. It's free, but it's not cheap. Heaven's open, and God wants to hear from you. He wants to hear from us, and he'll talk back to you. When you start explaining that, it kind of breaks down that whole religious culture in South America,
right,
where you have to pay to go and confess your sins. You got to, pay to get somebody to listen to you, to confess your sins. You got to pay to get somebody. You got to, you pay to get somebody out of purgatory. Although we don't, once you die, we obviously don't believe that. We believe that's it. You can't. Yeah. Your fate's sealed at that point. There's no changing it. Yeah. But in that culture, you have to pay for everything.
Right.
And so when you come and give them something, man, it really, really opens the door for evangelism at that point.
And it means a lot. Yep. So the chief, right before we left the island, there's so much that happened. I mean, we got to spend time with the kids, right? Like, there's missionaries there now, which there wasn't before.
A church plant as well.
A church plant, right? I think we were at one of the first services that they had. And so that was really special to see, because we never imagined that it would be here now.
This quickly.
Right?
Third trip.
Right. And there's a church. There's 2 missionaries that live on the islands.
In a people.
That was shocking.
An entire people group, multiple islands of people that are like asking us, please, before you leave, will you explain the gospel deeper for us?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we want a better understanding. Where did you find a whiteboard?
Well,
you just showed up on a boat one day with a whiteboard.
Well, if you remember when we went in and had the first, when we first got there, we had the church service in the raised up building, on stilts. I turned and saw the whiteboard. But the wild thing is, as I was finally landed and finally got over there and left, y'all were already on the islands. And I got in my boat a day later and was coming across, and Kyle had told me, we want you to speak at this first meeting. On the way over there praying, it's like the Lord showed me a whiteboard, and I'm like, yeah, Lord, there's no whiteboards over there. Where are we going to get one? And I be doggone, as they say. Soon as I walk in there, I turn, and they had a whiteboard up on the wall. I thought, wow, this is going to be good. I just feel like, God's going to use that. And sure enough, the request came, because they've been growing. That's the other shocking thing. I was wondering, the people that were converted 2.5 years ago, are they still living for the Lord, still followers of Christ? Right. Not only are they still following Christ, but their numbers have grown.
Right.
And then not only that, but they've grown spiritually.
Right.
And there's a hunger that they didn't have before, and they want more. And so when they ask us that, the Lord had been showing me how to make more drawings, if you will, visual aids on a whiteboard. And so we just used that whiteboard from that raised up, I'm going to go ahead and call it a church, raised up schoolhouse on stilts. And that's what we used to go deeper at their request.
Right.
And, that as much as anything, that was a great opportunity. So not only were we doing evangelism,
right, we're
doing some teaching and some pastoral impartation, into a body of believers that are not only living for the Lord, they're being a light,
Now, I know Pastor Leo, he kind of tag team with you a little bit.
That's true.
Right. And talk a little bit about, because I know you had, like you said, you had all these drawings, and you really had a great message on like just the spiritual walk with Christ, right? Like what it is to just go deeper in Christ. And you talked about a few other things. Maybe talk a little bit about like that moment when you tag team, because I feel like something happened there.
Yes, definitely. Because I was like, Lord, help me. God answers your prayer, but a lot of times he'll answer it through somebody else.
Right.
He'll answer your prayer if you call out for help. Well, he might not send you an angel, but he'll send somebody that he spoke to. And that was the case of what you're talking about. So I was trying to make this simple and not complicated. I know they say they wanted to go deeper, but, a lot of times people say that you still need to be clean and clear and make it simple. Don't make it complicated. But the key here was what he brought to the table was a practical application of what I just taught.
Right.
How do I take what he's taught here and apply it? And he came with some everyday cultural relevant things in their life that applied. And that broke it open right there. Because I couldn't really understand what he was saying, but it looked like he was talking about when somebody comes to you and they present you and they want you to drink alcohol. How do you overcome that? How do you defeat that temptation? And he used several scenarios like that. And my main thing is, everybody says, well, did you teach? Well, if you didn't learn anything, then I didn't teach. I don't care what I used and how much content I had. I'm not really a teacher if the people listening didn't learn or didn't receive it.
Right.
So I kept on checking, did they receive it? And I asked Leo, he said, oh, they got it. That was the main thing. And I think the reason they got it is because of what he did that connected to it, the tag team
That's
thing.
such a key in ministering in these type of places, because we don't want to come and give them American Jesus.
Yes.
Right.
Which is mostly what we know.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not trying to change their culture. We're not trying to make them Westerners. We're not trying to make them American. We're trying to bring them the gospel that makes sense to where they are, that can be applied where they are.
Right.
And so that's why we like partnering so much with someone who's a minister in that area, so that we can go, here's truth. We're bringing you truth that is through our lens, and that's what we know. And some of it's going to stick and some of it's not.
Right.
Here's someone who's local as well that can give us fresh perspective and context. All of it's truth.
Right.
But it makes all the difference.
Yeah. So Kyle, like I want to start talking soon about like La Rinconada, but there's this one moment right before we left the island that was like, I think really special, because the chief came to us and was like, thank you for visiting us. Thank you for the support. You want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
we blessed the island that let us set up a tent there every day, blessed all the families there, just a small gift. It ended up being about $30 a family, just to say thank you. We know we're an inconvenience. We love you guys. We don't want them to think that we're a source of income, but we also want to honor them. And we did different things. We talked about how we fed them through the pandemic and all those things that we did physically. But the chief was like, "We're grateful for all those things, but the best thing by a long shot that you've done is you've brought us the gospel. That to us is worth far more than anything else that you brought to us physically."
Yeah.
And that was just, there were some serious physical needs. Not like we, feeding through a pandemic where they can't rely on tourism or anything that they normally use for income. Like, there were serious needs, and for them to say, but still the gospel. And that's how we view it too.
Yeah.
We would hope that that's how people view it. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what people's needs are and what they value stuff as. So the fact that he was like, the gospel was the big thing.
Wow.
That is,
I didn't
that's
know
the
he
biggest
Yeah.
mission accomplished thing that can be said.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This time we got to go back to La Rinconada, and we got to see, I think, similar but slightly different moments, right? And we had last time. I think last time we were we were still in the same square, but we were in a different area. And it was just, God just did a lot of different things this time, right? We saw things we hadn't seen before. And it's probably, the more you go, you just start seeing different things. But Gary, I know you had a couple special moments praying for some people. Can you talk about those?
Yeah. As I'm sitting here thinking, of the 3 trips, they all had different personalities.
Yeah.
Different things happened. We had different team members, obviously, on all 3 trips. But I did notice there was this theme, when the difficulty is trying to relate to them in a way that they can understand. And I remembered a conversation, we've got this on film. Remember the first trip we were riding on the train, and we were talking about what we needed to do up there, and the Lord had given you a revelation about gold. And it's Acts chapter 3. You'd preached a little mini sermon right there. It's the part where Peter and John went to the temple to pray, and they said, "Silver and gold we don't have, but such as we have we give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ, rise up and walk." So even on that first trip, that was kind of the theme. I think it's on video where I'm preaching and I'm telling them, you're searching for this gold, and you're not finding it. But we come in the name of the one that made the gold. We come in the name of the one that made the mountain that's got the gold hidden in it.
Yeah.
And, if you'll get to know him, he'll help you with every part of your life. So that was kind of on the first trip. Well, this time I really felt led by the Lord to continue that theme.
Yeah.
So I used it, in a way to describe, hey, you guys are searching for this gold, and you're putting all this effort in for something that's going to vanish one day. Moth, the Bible says, and rust will corrupt. Thieves will break through and steal. And if you remember, that's their issue. Is even though you might find the gold, you're not out of the woods yet, so to speak, because around the corner is going to be somebody that's getting ready to strong arm rob you and take what you've worked so hard to get. The first trip, I actually prayed for a guy that had amassed the equivalent of $100,000. He'd found a life savings only to have somebody steal it from him.
Yeah.
And he was on the verge. Remember that? He was on the verge of depression. He was wanting to kill himself.
Yeah.
So he had a spirit of suicide on him. So that theme continued on, and that's kind of interesting. Although all 3 trips are completely different personality, there was a commonality, a thread, in the things that the Lord put in us to be able to, witness. But alluding to what you'd first made the statement, as soon as we got there, I set down my bags, and the Lord drew me to this couple.
Yeah.
And I could tell they'd been up all night. I could tell they were a couple. They were an item, if you will. And I could tell they were having hangover from drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And I could tell they wasn't getting along at that point. And I could tell, the devil was really working in their situation. So I went up to the girl. Now, you got to keep in mind, I talked a lot to this girl and asked a lot of questions, so I got a lot of information back. Come to find out, she had no spiritual background whatsoever in anything, not even Catholicism, never even darkened the door of a synagogue, a church, or whatever, And she made this statement, and it kind of like, I was like, wow. So here's this religious person telling me this. She said, "You know where you're standing?" And I said, "Well, it's my third time up here. I'm in La Rinconada." She said, "No, that's not what I mean." She said, "You're literally standing in Sodom and Gomorrah." Now, somebody apparently in her life had mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah. She knew enough to know, and she said that's where we were standing.
Wow.
Well, I'll cut through some details. You know, she ended up receiving Christ, and her partner, if you will, he ended up receiving Christ, and that was really the first two as we hit the ground there that received Christ right there in that plaza.
We ended up seeing 76. How many salvations was it?
It's 74.
74.
Total.
74 total.
Yeah.
Gave out 500 Bibles. We found a little alleyway of restaurants.
Yeah.
Like
That wasn't there before, was it? I don't remember.
I don't remember
know.
it.
I never saw it. Saw it. There's right beside the market that we always go to.
Yep.
There's just this corridor
Yep.
of restaurants. And I tell you what, it was like Cheers in there.
Oh, yeah.
They were happy to see us just come through, and we were handing out Bibles,
so
praying
good.
for people. It was just, things smelled amazing.
goodness.
There was no way I was going to eat it.
I wanted to, though, I have to admit.
If salmonella don't get you, the mercury will. The mercury don't get you.
The goat head will get you.
The goat head will get you.
There were goat heads
not,
there.
then
If you
you've
wanted to
got,
bowl a goat head, you could do that.
arsenic. If you make it through all those, then you still have the raw sewage.
Yeah.
So, but we just saw so many people. Remember the butcher that we met? Young guy, in his 20s probably.
Yeah.
Super sweet guy.
Nice store. He had a nice little business.
He had the biggest smile I've seen up there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting for him to say that he's just really struggling with alcohol abuse and the effects of that. And so, we just kind of talked him through and exchanged numbers, but just, there's real gems up there. Real sweet people.
Yeah.
I met a guy that was, he was like a seamstress. And so he works on all the uniforms, those jumpsuits they wear. And so, and so like after they wear out and whatnot, they, he just fixes them for him. Yeah. And so, but we were talking because I was walking by, actually I was walking into the corridor, right? Into this, like where all the restaurants are and everything. And I hear this like guy speaking in Spanish. It's like a recording. It's like a video, right? This guy's listening to like a sermon. This guy's just going in, and I'm like, what in the world is that? So I'm like, I start like looking for where the speaker's at, like looking to see if I could hear where the audio is coming from. Then I realize it's this little shop, and he's just sitting there, just sewing away, just, happy as all can be, and so I start asking him questions like, what are you doing? And it was really cool to hear some of his testimony. And so, I think we've seen God move in really unique ways. Mm-hmm. And I know the first time we went, we were like watching our backs because we didn't know what to expect. We were on the train.
Yeah.
Right. And then everybody was like begging us, please don't go to this place. Like, this is very dangerous. Like most people that go there, find themselves in a very dangerous moment. Mm-hmm. Right. And and rightly so. Not only is it like the weather is crazy, right. You're at 17,000 feet of elevation, so you've got so many things that are stacked up against you. There's no law. I think there's, what did they say, 4 policemen?
Something like that.
For the whole city. For 60,000 people.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, Kyle, you went the last time we were there. I didn't get to go. Gary didn't get to go.
I snuck off.
He snuck
to go
off.
up the mountain.
Yep.
And I felt like I had assignment up there, and I felt like you guys had assignment down there, and Gary is an adventurer, so I did not tell him. I told my wife, let Gary know in about 30 minutes. I thought, he can't catch up after 30 minutes. That where I had gone, and we met a guy who owns a mine, and we led him to the Lord, and what I didn't know is that Francisco for 2.5 years has been discipling him through the phone.
Huge. That's huge.
Sending him videos and messages and things like that, and really kept up with him so much that we all decided to go up on the mountains at 17,322 feet. And we stopped at his mine. He wanted to drop off a couple Bibles for him and a note, and he wasn't there in his office. Well, he was in the mine. Actually, I don't know if you heard this. He asked Warbe,
"Oh yeah,
were you guys in the mine?" And they're like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I heard you." He was in there working.
Wow.
Further back. It goes 50.
When we walked in?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like...
He could hear our voice?
Yeah. He's like, were you in the mine?
Yeah. Didn't he say it goes 1,500 meters?
He said
back?
400 meters.
400 meters
400
back.
meters.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we talked to him, and he's like, he messaged him on the phone that we were there. So he came running out of the mine and met up with us after we prayed on top of the mountain. He was like, my life has changed. You have no idea.
Yeah.
My whole family's changed. All my circumstance. We were hearing through translation. I don't know if I heard everything, but he was just ecstatic that we brought him the gospel. And it's just so good. You don't get, a lot of times when you do this kind of thing, you move on to the next place, or, you don't see the same people. You don't get to see the fruit of it. And so it's just such a win when you can talk to someone that is like,
Yeah.
my life has changed.
On the way down, when we were walking down towards the city, after you guys, because you guys went up high and prayed over the city. I think Pastor Francisco was this man's like mountain goat. He's just literally just running up the rocks and, finding random people, praying for them. I think there was 3 people that got saved that we didn't know of, that he had randomly found as he was just going through the mountain. And, but on our way down, Jaime, right, I was trying to think of his name. Jaime was telling us that he had actually been discipling someone else. And so it's just like,
wow,
right? That's my response too, because it's like you said, like, we went up there, we preached to this guy. It was a miner. Pastor Francisco has been discipling him. And then he's like already making the connection. You know what? I need to go do this too.
And you're bringing up a great point there, because, when you go as an evangelist or a missionary and you're doing outreach, the question I always get from pastors that support Far-Flung Tin Can, all right, the 362 on the second trip received Christ.
Yeah.
What are y'all doing for follow-up? All right. Who's taking care of them when y'all leave? That's always a concern. So I think that's this third trip to answer that question, because the Lord has worked out for 2 other missionaries to be up there, which is plus Leo and Francisco. Yeah. And they're working with these new converts. And so that was the biggest thing. And the major thing was, the enemy sometimes, if you're an evangelist and you're praying with somebody and they're becoming followers of Christ, disciples of Christ, you get this voice that says nothing really happened. They didn't really get transformed. Well, this third trip proved to me that it's worth it all. No matter how hard this is, no matter what we got to do, no matter how much money it costs, it is worth it. And the gospel is there, and it's bringing forth fruit. And this third trip spiritually was easier there on the mountain, but I think the key was when y'all went up there on the second trip. Yeah. Because the governor that we met down in the plaza while y'all were up there praying, in their way of saying it, in the Peruvian way of saying it, he was talking to Mary, and I was standing there. He basically said, we got the keys to the city. He might have not known what he was saying, but spiritually speaking, that's exactly, Jesus said he gives us the keys to the kingdom. Whatsoever we bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatsoever is loosed on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So I believe a direct result, a direct correlation was when y'all were up there and that last time you prayed. That's why this time we saw the fruit of a guy still living for the Lord, and his life has progressed. Discipleship's going on, and we got the keys to the city. Yeah. So it's like we got an open door, an open heaven, to minister there. And that's why I feel like the liberty was there, to be able to do that. And so part of it, I think, is the Lord saying, y'all are doing my will. You're in my will. Keep on doing it, because we feel like that's a place we're going to return to,
Some might think, like, aren't there Peruvians that can just go up there and minister? You guys live in North America. You're going to fly all the way there. When we went the first time, and Francisco's telling Leo, hey, these guys want to go up there. Leo was like, I don't think you should be going up there. And Leo is, he's a pastor and doing what he's doing. And of course, Francisco had done some stuff on the floating islands. But Leo ends up watching the first video, the episode we did.
This is good.
And it stirs something in him. And he kept saying, these men came all the way from America for my people. Yeah. Why am I not going there for them?
That's a good point, Kyle.
And so Leo is stirred by us going. And so he starts doing work on the islands. And then they appoint him to be head over missions for Peru for the Church of God. So then they start sending him missionaries after seminary.
Wow,
and then he's saying, I know where they need to go.
Thank you, Jesus.
And then, so now there's missionaries there full time serving because he was inspired by us going to a place that were not our people, quote unquote.
That's good.
Oh,
and
that's
so
great.
Now there is this. It's always better to have locals and people that know the culture. So, but now there's this database of missionaries and Leo and Francisco and Hyman. They're all taking up a call to do something where they can do it more constant. Yeah. And we are serving as motivators and encouragers and just let's go, let's tell the story, let's do this. Anything is possible. And then we leave and we step away and we come back a year later. But in the meantime, there are people on the ground now that are just chipping away at it.
Thank you, Lord.
That are pouring in. Yeah. Man, I feel like there's so many stories.
Oh my goodness.
You know, I mean, we could probably go on for a whole nother hour.
Do another podcast.
A whole nother podcast because
to get all the
detail. I mean, we've seen miracles. We've seen people. I mean, their lives completely transformed in an instant. I mean, that first trip, we prayed for 9 hours nonstop. We had no idea where we were, what we were doing. We just know we were praying for people.
Put it on auto mode. Just go for it.
I think Kyle says he looks over at me and you at one point.
You look like an
Paul
apostle. No, you look like an apostle that is giving his last mantle. Because these guys were so tired. I went off and did some drone footage, and by the time I came back, they are sitting like on a curb and lifting their hands up to touch people's heads, and they're like bowing down, and they're just praying their last, Lord bless them.
That's literally what we were so tired in that moment. At that point, we'd given everything.
My voice was so tired.
He was raspy,
working overtime trying to breathe, and then the other thing too is you were sick on that trip.
He's sick every time we go to La Rinconada.
And I don't know what it is. Poor Jonathan has to bear the physical attack that comes from, doing
at first I thought it was just random, but I've noticed that every time I go to Peru,
that first time when we were in Cusco and we only slept like 3 hours and we got up and he had a sinus infection and he wasn't gonna get out of bed. I was like, Jonathan, I know you feel awful, but we have a train to catch. You just have to get up. You just have to.
I feel so bad for him.
There's just no alternative. He's like, okay.
That morning I woke up. You were doing an update video.
Oh my gosh. He was hacking.
He was just hacking in the background.
I'm like sitting there trying to do the video, and he was like, oh. I was like, please, we have 20 minutes to do this update. So, this Peru trip, it happens every year.
Yep.
It looks like we've kind of set that we're going to try to do these probably every November.
Yeah.
You can sign up on the website and apply to go on this trip to the floating islands. And then we do go to La Rinconada, but that part is optional because we've had really great success and the Lord's with us, but you just don't know what's going to happen. We can't guarantee your safety up on the mountain. So, if you sign up for the trip, you're going to experience the floating islands. And then when it comes to the day in La Rinconada, you can choose to go up on the mountain, or you can have a free day and go to the hot springs, which the hot springs is a whole thing of itself. So we want you to join us in these stories and these adventures and bring the giftings that God gives you.
Yeah. Right.
Because I only have a certain skill set, and Jonathan has a skill set. Gary has a skill set, and as we get people to come on, the Lord opens different doors for different types of ministry because people are gifted in different ways, and missions looks like a million different things. Yeah. So we want you to join us. Yeah. And we want you to keep listening to this podcast.
That's it.
Yes.
You want to close us out?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. Be watching out for the next one, and we will see you next time.